The British press has named this trial as one of the most expensive in the history of English law. $2 billion. This is how much Ukrainian oligarch Viktor Pinchuk demanded in the High Court of London from two other Ukrainian oligarchs, Ihor Kolomoyskyi and Henadiy Boholyubov. They litigated for a profitable Ukrainian company, and finally they entered into a peace agreement, the details of which they refused to disclose. But we uncovered them, and they are really quite impressive.
I had no idea. That is amazing.
No.
Yes.
That's amazing.
We will show how Ukrainian oligarchs appropriate one of the most expensive real estate objects in the world, and how using offshores they conceal their ownership of this property. All this and more in this special edition of Slidstvo.Info on the financial secrets of the Ukrainian elite and those who serve it abroad. In the middle of the steppes in central Ukraine is the city of Kryvyi Rih. It is an industrial giant which stretches over 120 kilometers. It's more like a cluster of workers' settlements than a city. Each settlement has grown around its own industry, factories, mines, or quarries. This is where the largest amount of Ukraine's iron ore deposits are. Because of this, the dust on the road and the water in the puddles is often red. In the 2000s, Ukrainian oligarchs began to divide up the industries in Kryvyi Rih, the wreckage of the Soviet industrial enterprise. Since then, the oligarchs have been firmly entrenched in the global rich list. However, the people living in the suburbs of Kryvyi Rih are as poor as ever. The Kryvyi Rih Iron Ore Combine, or OCCRP for short, is one of the largest iron ore companies in Ukraine. The combine uses iron ore extracted from 4 mines 1.5 kilometers deep. This is the same company that was the subject of a 2013 court battle between Viktor Pinchuk on one side and Ihor Kolomoyskyi and his partner Henadiy Boholyubov on the other. Pinchuk argued that he handed over $140 million to Kolomoyskyi and Boholyubov in the mid-2000s to buy the combine. However, according to him, he received neither the business nor the money back. Pinchuk estimated a $2 billion profit loss over the years. In the center of Kryvyi Rih, we meet with Oleksandr Potapenko, an underground worker at OCCRP. On his way home, Alexander tells us how things are going at the company over which the oligarchs fought. My friend went to Poland. He was made redundant from the mine. He went there. He has a disabled child. He does something else now. He worked at a Volkswagen factory to begin with. He earns $300 to $400 for 2 shifts. Every man has to have a place. Us simple ATO men can chat. Alexander was a volunteer in the military action in the Donbass, where the Ukrainian army has been fighting against Russians and local separatists for 4 years now. He served in the Krivbas volunteer battalion and was at some of the most fierce battles in 2014 and 2015. Our city's flag, Kryvyi Rih. It went to Ilovaisk, the military flag, our Kryvyi Rih flag. Many boys gave their lives for this so that our children can walk the streets safely. This spring, together with other miners, Potapenko tried to organize a strike at OCCRP. The workers demanded better wages and better social welfare, medical care, and holidays. Let the owners know what is going on in their company, why the people are striking. Take the shop Allo, where a person earns 8,000 to 9,000 hryvnia. A mining expert also earns 8,000 to 9,000. Either you're above ground, where it's clean, or you're in the dirt, where you're responsible for every single person. The state sold the Kryvyi Rih iron ore combine in 2004. The then president of Ukraine, Leonid Kuchma, signed a law under which the 10 most powerful Ukrainian mining and metallurgical companies, which belonged to the state holding company Ukrudprom, were sold for a symbolic sum. President Kuchma's son-in-law, Viktor Pinchuk, tried to take control of the KZRK. However, after 2004, when Kuchma's presidency ended, Pinchuk's influence diminished. KZRK remained in the hands of Kolomoyskyi and Boholyubov. Rinat Akhmetov and Vadim Novinsky bought up the rest of the Ukrudprom assets. 3 years after the Euromaidan victory, a parliamentary commission was set up to verify the results of the scandalous privatization of the 2000s. The commission came to some obvious but sad conclusions. Ukrainian oligarchs bought the Ukrudprom companies for almost nothing. In my opinion, the privatization of Ukrudprom is the biggest privatization deal in Ukraine's independence. Pavlo Ryzanenko, a Ukrainian MP and one of the leaders of the commission, thinks that the amount the Ukrainian financial industrial group paid for the Ukrudprom companies is many times lower than a fair price. Looking at the real value of Ukrudprom's assets, it was almost $20 billion in 2005, but they bought the entire holding, artificially limiting competition for only $400 million. One of these companies, the Kryvyi Rih iron ore combine, was bought by Mr. Kolomoyskyi Structures from the state for $40 million, even though its actual value was over $1 billion. $40 million, that's as much as the profit made by the combine last year, according to the official report. Kolomoyskyi and Boholyubov later sold a share of the combine to Rinat Akhmetov. Between 2005 and 2016, KZRK paid its owners $500 million in dividends. So in order to keep such an attractive enterprise for themselves, Kolomoyskyi and Boholyubov had to give Viktor Pinchuk something truly valuable. Obviously, that's what they did. We do not know if Pinchuk received the $2 billion payoff for KZRK. However, the compensation that we were made aware of was more than worthy. The capital of Great Britain, a global financial center, and probably the most attractive place to resolve legal disputes when it comes to big money. A Ukrainian oligarch sued 2 other Ukrainian oligarchs over Ukrainian assets, but not in the Ukrainian court. He chose to take his claim to the Supreme Court in London. Nick Mathieson is one of the founders of Finance Uncovered, an investigative group which uncovers money laundering schemes. In a small office on the top floor of an old building in London, Nick and his colleagues investigate the reasons why businessmen from all over the world want to live, relax, and even settle legal disputes in Great Britain.
I think Ukrainian businessmen, oligarchs, and in fact oligarchs, businessmen around the world use the London courts to settle their differences because London has a very well-established international legal system. The legal system is looked upon favourably in the rest of the world, and we have a big legal services sector that caters very much to resolving international disputes.
However, in January 2016, 3 days before the court hearings began between Pinchuk on one side and Kolomoyskyi and Boholyubov on the other, they came to an out-of-court settlement. The details of the deal that took place on that day were kept secret from the public. However, we have now found out what the Ukrainian oligarchs agreed upon in their dispute over an important Ukrainian company. Their battle begins and ends here in the center of the British capital. According to the documents Slidstvo.Info and the Organized Crime and Corruption Reporting Project received as part of the Paradise Papers leak, Viktor Pinchuk received a more than generous compensation for KZRK. It includes 2 luxury buildings in prestigious areas of London. This is the office of one of the most famous British law firms, Hogan Lovells. They represented Pinchuk in the aforementioned legal dispute. At the start of 2016, shortly before the court settlement, the firm appealed to the international administrator of the offshore company Appleby. Philip Beswick, a senior employee of Hogan Lovells, asked a partner at Appleby, Simon Kane, to urgently take on a new client.
Dear Simon, we act for Mr. Pinchuk, who is currently engaged in a dispute with Mrs. Boholyubov and Kolomoyskyi. A conditional settlement of that dispute is on the table, whereby Mrs. Boholyubov and Kolomoyskyi will make a series of staged future payments to Mr. Pinchuk over the course of several years. Those future obligations, in our case, are to be secured by way of security over a number of bank accounts, which we now understand will be domiciled in the Isle of Man. This information was only shared with us last night, hence our comment to you in a hurry.
The lawyers at Hogan Lovells had a good reason to rush the offshore law registrar, Appleby. The letter was sent on January 20th, 2016, 5 days before the court hearing on the case. Obviously, both parties did not want any third parties witnessing clarification of their relationship, especially journalists. Therefore, they sought to come to a settlement as quickly as possible, even before the hearing began. It even mentions the significant monetary payments Kolomoyskyi and Boholyubov had to make to Pinchuk, and this money could not go through Ukraine or even Britain, but through the Isle of Man, where they would be taxed at a minimum. After just 2 hours, a response from Appleby arrived, stating that it would be possible to open an offshore account on the Isle of Man, and it would not require much effort. How much did they plan to spend on these 3 accounts? Further developments in the situation show that it was hundreds of millions of dollars. But first, they had to pay for the services of the offshore registrar.
Dear Philip, I know that we need to formalize our engagement on this matter, so I have asked my secretary Lisa to send to you an engagement letter, which will be with you shortly. I specify that your firm will be our client and consequently responsible for our fees, which will be in the region of £3,000 to £4,000, plus VAT and disbursements.
However, on February 2nd, 10 days after the announcement of the settlement between Pinchuk, Kolomoyskyi, and Boholyubov, another letter from Pinchuk's lawyer arrived from the offshore administrator Appleby. In addition to the monetary payment, Kolomoyskyi and Boholyubov clearly offered to cover part of the debt with another attractive asset.
Dear Simon, it looks like we will shortly have an additional piece of corporate work on this matter, which we would really appreciate your assistance with. As part of the settlement, which your current engagement relates to, the other parties agreed to transfer 2 high-value prime London commercial properties to Mr. Pinchuk.
Nick Mathieson explains how Pinchuk was easily able to accept elite London real estate instead of money to clear part of the debt.
The value of London property is astronomical. I mean, more spectacular it may be for the residential home market. That has seen a huge rise. There are now 40,000 properties held in London that are offshore, that are just for homes. That's worth billions and billions of pounds, and we've seen investors all over the world. And it's the same with offices as well in the centre of London. It's immensely valuable. London is a hugely attractive centre.
The first building which Kolomoyskyi and Boholyubov offered to hand over to Pinchuk is an office at 27 Knightsbridge in central London, the prestigious Belgravia area. Opposite the building is the famous Hyde Park, and further down the road is Buckingham Palace. The building itself is 64,000 square feet. Its value at the end of 2015 was estimated at £75,650,000. And its annual income from leasing was £4 million, according to the documents we received. In a pub on the outskirts of London, we meet with Oliver Bullough, a journalist for the British publication The Guardian. He has written extensively on Ukrainian oligarchs and politicians who move to London and buy expensive real estate and luxury goods there. The journalist tells us why this is the permanent place of residence for Pinchuk and Boholyubov, and also why Kolomoyskyi, who lives in Geneva, also likes London and often spends time there.
All of the professionals you need to move your money, the bankers, the accountants, the lawyers, they're all here. It's a very liquid market. And also, we have not just the professionals you need to move your money, but also all the nice things that rich people like. We have the top schools, we have top universities, we have top hospitals, we have, Rolls-Royce showrooms, Bentley showrooms, Maserati showrooms, whatever you want, yachts, we have it all. London is it's not just a great place to move money around, it's also a really good place to spend money. And there aren't very many places in the world that are like that, where not only can you move your money, but you can also buy anything you want. So, it's only really London and New York is quite a long way away, so why not come to London? I think it's It's more a question of if you've got a load of money, where are you going to spend it? You're going to spend it where there's fun stuff to buy, and that's what London has.
However, the lawyers hired by Pinchuk state that both properties are already registered in a chain of offshore companies from the Isle of Man, and in order to complete the deal, it is necessary to re-register the offshore firms to a new owner. For this, it is planned to create a trust in Jersey, which will be owned by companies on the Isle of Man, and will therefore acquire ownership of the building. Naomi Hurst is an expert at Global Witness, an organization which uncovers corruption. She explains why such a complicated offshore structure was created.
Well, we know in the UK it is far too easy to own property through anonymous companies, what we call shell companies, which are companies set up with perhaps the purpose of disguising the true ownership, the true beneficial owner. And the Isle of Man, Jersey, they do not have public registers of beneficial ownership. So who exactly the shareholders or directors of these particular companies based in the Isle of Man or Jersey, we don't know. And not commenting on this case specifically, but what we see as a general trend is that people who have suspicious money, criminal money, are quite keen to disguise the fact that it's criminal, right? So they will register an anonymous company in a secrecy jurisdiction. This might be the British Crown dependencies, such as the Isle of Man or Jersey. It might be Delaware, it might be the British Virgin Islands or Belize. They will establish an anonymous company there, put their money into it, and bingo, you know, it's disguised. You can't trace that money back to them. And it's a way of cleaning their money. And at the moment, it is currently completely legal in the UK for an anonymous company to buy up property. And the enticing thing about property is that you can invest a huge amount of money in one go.
The real royal trophy for Pinchuk is the second building. This is also located in central London. If you look at Google Maps, the center of London is right here, where I'm standing, here on Trafalgar Square. This is where the Ukrainian oligarchs settled their debts with one another using among the grandest buildings in the British capital, the grand buildings on Trafalgar Square. For British people, the grand buildings on Trafalgar Square are symbols of the capital. This grandiose structure was once the location of the Grand Hotel. In 1988, it was reconstructed and it is now office spaces, expensive restaurants, and shops. Like other well-known buildings in London, it shows the greatness and glory of the United Kingdom. Opposite this building, Nelson's Column towers overhead. It is a monument to the famous British admiral who defeated the united Franco-Spanish fleet near Cape Trafalgar. Here, in this symbolic place for all Britons, the controversy surrounding 3 Ukrainian oligarchs ends, and we would never have known about it if it weren't for the latest in a series of leaks about offshore secrets, which find their way into the hands of a group of international investigative journalists. We asked our British colleagues about what they think about the way in which Ukrainian oligarchs are settling their disputes.
I'll show you. This is it.
Holy shit. Trafalgar Square.
Do you recognize it? Yes, this is a grand building on Trafalgar Square.
And that belongs to Pinchuk?
Now to Pinchuk, yes. A year ago it belonged to Kolomoyskyi.
I had no idea. That is amazing. We'll put that in our kleptocracy tour. We have a kleptocracy tour.
Mm-hmm.
So that belonged to Kolomoyskyi?
Previous.
Yeah, and then...
a year ago. Now it's belonged to Pinchuk. Yes.
It's one of the most iconic buildings in central London. That is absolutely extraordinary. I mean, nothing surprises me about people owning property in London, but that's extraordinary. I didn't know.
This is it. Do you recognize it?
Wow, I mean that's right on Trafalgar Square. This is like one of the most famous squares, if not the most famous square in London. And this is a really impressive piece of real estate worth hundreds of millions of pounds, I would imagine.
No,
Yes.
that's amazing. That's just off Trafalgar Square.
Yeah. That's on the Trafalgar Square Grand Buildings.
That's astonishing.
Mhm.
You know, my mum used to work in that building. Yeah. Yeah.
Right
She,
now?
yeah. No, my
Oh.
mum used to work for the Ministry of Defence, and she worked just in that building, I think. That's amazing. That's a UK landmark, right around Nelson's Column, and you've got all these tourists coming to the UK and taking photos of this place.
Mm-hmm.
That's amazing. And also, that's just up the road from Parliament. It's right next to the government.
Yeah.
Wow. That's expensive. That's hundreds of millions, no?
To be precise, a year ago this building was valued at £305 million. This is the amount stated in the financial report of the offshore owner company on the Isle of Man, which Slidstvo.Info has at its disposal. However, by agreeing to the ownership of the building's offshore scheme, Pinchuk's London lawyers at Hogan Lovells, in their letter to Appleby, add that this structure will be created for tax purposes also.
Following completion, the client will be taking over the control of the two above-mentioned Isle of Man companies and will need to continue to administer them in the Isle of Man and also maintain a majority of Isle of Man directors for tax purposes.
Nick Mathewson from Finance Uncovered explains what this could mean.
Potentially you can save taxes and also crucially you can hide your identity. You don't have to show to the world that you own this building. You can hide behind an offshore company, and that also presents difficulties for enforcement officers, enforcement agencies around the world if they want to understand who owns properties, if they're looking to investigate money launderers, corrupt people. Offshore is really a good way to hide from those authorities.
We asked Viktor Pinchuk, Ihor Kolomoyskyi, and Henadiy Boholyubov to confirm the data we received and also to comment on whether there were any other conditions to their out-of-court agreement, apart from the transfer of elite London real estate. We also asked why they set up such a complicated offshore ownership structure for these properties, and whether it was done to minimize taxes on leasing, buying, or selling them. Ihor Kolomoyskyi responded, saying that he could not comment due to his obligation to comply with the confidentiality condition he agreed to as part of the settlement. We received the same response from Viktor Pinchuk. Before the shift change at the Kryvyi Rih iron ore combine, we speak to Olena Maslova. She is the company's union leader. She tells us how the combine's owners reduce costs, not only at the expense of the workers' salaries, but their health as well, and in doing so, also increase their profits.
The legal department stumbled across this document that states that, upon beginning work here, I was aware of the harmfulness of the conditions. However, in event of harm, I do not have any material or other rights to the company. But people have no choice. They sign it. And this is huge. If something happens to someone, this document allows the owners to avoid legal action. In the event of fatality, the relatives are not able to claim compensation.
I would like to work as a trainee underground worker. I'm aware that working in harmful conditions negatively affects health, and I may contract a workplace-related illness in the future. In this regard, I do not have, and will not have, in the future, any claim of a monetary or non-monetary nature to the company.
The owners try to eliminate financial loss in any way.
The leadership of KZRK sent a response to our question on the workers' low salaries and weak social care. In it, they complain,
Unfortunately, some hot-headed people do not understand the laws of economy and demand their own preferences. In 2017, there was a pay rise of 20%, after which the average wage for the company became one of the highest in the industry. We planned another increase already at the end of 2017. However, not only does the current economic situation not allow us to think about a salary increase, but it also forces us to take on the most serious austerity measures.
The managers of the combine refused to give an interview. Instead, they suggested that we watch a film about the company. In this video, happy and smiling miners work, play sports, and applaud their bosses. There is no mention of the expensive British real estate, the offshore schemes, or the crazy amounts of money that make their way to Ukrainian oligarchs abroad.